Hi, everyone. Before we get started with our workshop about identity theft, I'm going to introduce the Financial Wellness Center. So, at the Financial Wellness Center, we're trying to financially empower students at the University of Oregon to make sound financial decisions during and after college. By doing so, we offer workshops on various topics such as budgeting, saving, investing, and identity theft. And we also offer one-on-one appointments. So if anyone needs any or has any questions about any financial topics, feel free to schedule an appointment with one of the peer financial coaches and we can walk you through your situation and help you out. So now I'll kick it off to Tina Kondo. Um, she works at the FTC. So go ahead, Tina.
Thank you, Taylor and Gilbert. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with all of you. My only regret is that I can't come down to campus because even though my picture shows Seattle, I was telling Gilbert and Taylor that I'm actually a duck. I'm wearing my Oregon shirt. I've got my Oregon earrings on. I've got my duck mug here, so I'm all ready to go here. But what I wanted to say first is congratulations on actually, first of all, having a financial wellness center. That's fabulous. I had not heard of schools having financial wellness centers, and Gilbert told me about how that came about. But the other thing is just the fact that you're having this program puts you that much farther ahead of the game. And I hope that you can take the information that you get today and share it with your clients and with your peer counselors, because identity theft is a huge problem, as you'll see in the slides. And everything we can do to prevent identity theft, we just need to do, because as you'll see in the slides, it's a problem every day. And as I told Gilbert, unfortunately, on identity theft complaints, it's pretty difficult to get people's money back because oftentimes the criminals are overseas or not contactable. So before I get started, I want to give the government disclaimer, which is that my views are my own and do not represent the official views of the Federal Trade Commission or any individual commissioner. Okay, so what is the Federal Trade Commission? There's often a lot of confusion because people think, oh, you must do imports and exports because isn't that trade? And our answer is, well, that's not exactly what we do. When we say we regulate trade, we mean we regulate trade practices. And so that means what we call unfair or deceptive acts or practices are against the law. And we're the nation's consumer protection agency that monitors for unfair or deceptive acts or practices. We're an independent commission. We've got 5 commissioners. We're bipartisan by law. So that means that there can't be more than 3 commissioners of any particular party. Right now, we have 2 Republicans and 2 Democrats. There is 1 Democrat who's been nominated, but he hasn't gone through the hearing process. So at the current time, we are split. And so that means the parties have to work together in order to vote anything out. We have 8 regional offices. I'm in the Northwest office, but we have offices in Los Angeles, San Francisco, Atlanta, Cleveland, Dallas, Chicago, New York. And here in the Northwest, we represent the Northwest states, as you might guess, from Alaska down to Wyoming, but obviously including Washington, Oregon, Idaho, Montana as well. Our major purpose in the regional offices is to file lawsuits and to investigate and follow up on consumer complaints. We will file lawsuits against people if we find that they've been violating the law. We engage in consumer and business education, which is what we're doing now. We make and enforce rules. And the TSR is the telephone sales rule. So that's the rule that prohibits robocalls. Now, I understand that everybody gets a million robocalls every day, but if we can find somebody who's been violating the telephone sales rule or the anti-robocall rule, we will bring an enforcement action against them. Oftentimes, it's in conjunction with another underlying fraud that they're committing. So we'll say, for example, somebody's stealing IDs, and in the process of doing that, they're using robocalls. We can combine the two, and that's usually the way we enforce the robocall rule. We also have a part of our office that protects competition, and that means that we do antitrust cases, and that means things like price fixing or anti-monopoly. So there's really 2 big parts of the Federal Trade Commission, but we're going to be talking today about the consumer protection side. So let's look at the Consumer Sentinel data. What is Consumer Sentinel? Consumer Sentinel is our complaint database. And the great thing about Consumer Sentinel is that it combines information from all over the country. So for example, in Oregon, you've got a great attorney general, very active in the consumer protection area. And here in Washington, we have the same. And so each state will have law enforcement agencies that collect consumer complaints, and then they send them to us so that we can compile them in what we call our Consumer Sentinel database. And that way we can find out what's happening across the country, not just what's happening in any particular state. So last year, you can see that we got 4.7 million reports. And what were our top 3 categories? Identity theft. And along with identity theft goes imposter scams. So it's really great that you're having this program, because those really are the areas that are hitting consumers hardest these days. A couple of the statistics, if you look at the bottom, you'll see that we say that younger people are actually losing a lot of money to fraud these days, more often than older people. We'll get into the statistics here in a minute. But when older folks get ripped off, they end up paying proportionately a lot more money. So here's a little graph that shows you the same thing, fraud loss by median amount and by age. And you can see how the two things sort of cross paths. And we thought about the reasons for that. And one might be that a lot of identity theft happens online. And younger people, or the younger demographic, tends to be online more often. You're on your phones all the time, you're on your computers all the time. Older adults really are not as tech engaged. And so because a lot of the identity theft happens through tech, they might not be getting as many reports of fraud. On the other hand, once they're contacted, they oftentimes give a lot more money before they figure out that they're being ripped off, which is unfortunate. Here are our report categories from Consumer Sentinel. Again, you can see identity theft is right there at the top. But since we're talking about financial wellness, you can also see that credit bureaus and information furnishers and report users are a high complaint area. Debt collection is a high complaint area. Credit cards are a high complaint area, and that's often related to identity theft. And because we're talking about you guys who are at a university, I want to talk for a second about student loan debt relief fraud. That is a big problem. My office here in the Northwest has filed several fake student loan debt relief outfits who will call and promise to help you with student loan debt relief. And in reality, they're not paying your debt off, or they're doing something that you could do perfectly well for free. So if somebody comes calling saying that they can offer you student loan debt relief and they charge you for it, I would be very suspicious about that. And think long and hard about whether or not you want to go with that company. Again, identity theft reports by age. This is the point I was making earlier, but it breaks it down into decades categories. And you can see how the bell curve kind of goes. The folks between 20 and 60 are not immune to identity theft by any means. And in fact, the demographics you would think that would be the savviest or the more on top of things. Again, I think it's because folks are just more online and more engaged in technology. So this again talks about identity theft reports by type and non-federal. This is my point I was making earlier about federal student loans. A lot of these have to do with student loan relief scammers. And if you look at our website, which is ftc.gov, you can pull up press releases and copies of complaints that we filed against student loan debt relief outfits that have been scammers. Let's look at Oregon specifically. Again, you guys aren't any different than the rest of the country, unfortunately. Identity theft is there at the top, followed by imposter scams. I wish I could tell you that you were different or somehow immune from it, but unfortunately I can't. If you look at the top identity theft types at the bottom, you'll see that credit card fraud is the number one. And there's also government benefits. And if you look at the little dots on the map, you can see that's where we're getting a lot of our fraud reports, and that's because those are the metropolitan areas. But what I want to say, the good news is we have a list of the top 50 metropolitan areas across the country for identity theft, and there were no Oregon cities on that list. And I thought that was very impressive. I don't know if y'all are just smarter than everybody else, but I was very impressed with that. Washington, on the other hand, had 6. So I don't know what that says about Washington versus Oregon, but we had a lot more cities listed for identity theft reporting. So how do we continue having this great record? We educate folks just like you guys are doing. We all know what identity theft is, I think. It's when somebody uses your personal information to do things like get money or get credit cards in your name, or get other goods or services like pay for utilities, or they can use your identity to hide from law enforcement. We hear about that less, of course, but we do hear a lot about the obtaining money or ruining people's credits. On the left, you'll see the misuses: credit cards, utility accounts. Tax refunds has been a big thing. If you are filing taxes, we recommend that you try to file online, because there's less of a chance that somebody can claim your identity at the IRS if you've already claimed it and you get your own password and things. So we do recommend people, if you can file online, I would file online so that you can capture your identity with the IRS yourself before somebody else does it. They can apply for employment. They can apply for medical care. We have informational brochures on medical identity theft. What happens to victims? All of those things that you see on the right. It can mess up your credit for a long time. You can get a denial of benefits. You can get denial of medical care. You get harassed by debt collectors for debts that aren't yours. It creates a whole lot of stress. And one of the things that we always make a point of saying is, it's not just the money, it's the recovery time and expense that it takes you to straighten out your identity theft problems. And time is worth a lot. So this was going to be a video, but I couldn't get it to load. But it was just a video about a woman who sadly had her ID stolen, and she went through a lot of trouble and expense and stress to get her information straightened out. This information is a little bit old. It's from 2017, but I couldn't find anything more current. It's kind of depressing, I thought, because it tells you that even though you can spend hours and hours and hours straightening out your ID theft problem, this is how much your ID was sold for on the dark web. And it's probably even less now, because this is 2017 and there have been so many data breaches and identity theft problems that I would say, I'm guessing that your social security number now probably is selling for less than $1. And your driver's license is probably being sold for less than $20. If you look at the upper right-hand side, you look at credit or debit card information, that gives you an idea of the range of the value that the dark web is where the criminals hang out, obviously. That gives you an idea of how much your information is worth. When it says Fulls info there where the arrow is, that means it's worth more, because that has your social, it's got your name, it's got your address, it's got everything people need to establish an identity in your name. So it is very sad to see how little your information is selling for on the web versus how much trouble it's going to create for you. What do you do? Well, these are some of the things you can pass on to your clients or your fellow counselors. We always tell people to opt out of pre-screened offers. You might not get those yet, but at some point you're going to start getting, you qualify for, a credit card at this bank or that bank or whatever. Try to opt out of those kinds of offers, because then people can't steal them out of your mailbox and fill them out and pretend like they're you. Get on do not call lists. We have a do not call registry at the FTC. Hopefully, quite frankly, a lot of criminals ignore the do not call list, but the legitimate people will comply with it. So do get on the do not call registry. Protect your social security number. Even though it's only worth $1 on the dark web, it can create a lot of problems if somebody gets it. So do try to protect your social. I think folks now pretty much only take the last 4 if they take anything. And sometimes, when you're filling out forms, it doesn't hurt to ask if they really need your social security number or if you can provide some other kind of ID. Storing documents in locked mailboxes. AARP did a study a few years ago, or an experiment actually, and they drove around neighborhoods just to see how many people had unlocked boxes, and they said it was just astounding how many people still have mailboxes that are not secure. And what that opens you up to is that somebody can just, go look at mailboxes, see who's got a credit card statement, open it up. Now they know where you bank. They've got your account number. It just gives them a lot more information they can use to steal your identity if they want to. So that was sort of a surprising thing to find out. Use credit cards, not debit cards. Why? Well, credit cards have some protection against them. If somebody misuses your credit card, you can report it to your bank, and usually there's a limit on how much you will be liable for. And usually it's not much. In fact, most banks now are pretty good about, if you report identity theft, they'll usually credit you back. Debit cards, the problem that creates with a debit card is that's associated with your savings account or your checking account, and there's usually a lot more money in there than there is the limit on your credit card. So we always caution people to use their credit cards, or if you're going to use a debit card, be really careful about your PIN number and protecting that. Check your bank statements online. I used to be somebody who would say, I'm just going to get a hard copy. It's easier for me to read, and I can check things, and why not? But what I failed to realize, and I do now because I've been the victim of ID theft, is if you check your bank statement online, you can do it every day if you want to, if you're obsessive about it, or you can check it every week, and you can make sure that there hasn't been fraudulent activity on your account. If you only get your statement once a month, then you're not going to catch that fraudulent activity until you get your bank statement. Banks' algorithms have gotten much better now, so that if they see something suspicious, you might get a phone call or you might get a text. But it's really better to just bank online and check your accounts every once in a while, and just make sure there hasn't been any fraudulent activity. Don't use ATMs or gas pumps that look funny. I'll have some pictures here in a minute about skimmers and shimmers. Consider separate accounts when traveling. And again, I say this because of personal experience. I went on a trip to Europe. My sister and I both went, actually, and we discovered that both of us had used the same ATM machine in Italy. And a couple days later, we started getting pinged about, having transactions take place in Canada and using our credit cards or our ATM cards. And so, lo and behold, they had done that, and they had taken quite a bit of money, at least from my account. And a friend of mine gave me the clue of just before I travel now, I just set up a separate account with my bank so that it doesn't have very much money in it, so that if somebody does steal my ATM information, they're not going to get as much money from me as they might. So that's just a little tip for if you're traveling. Beware of imposters. Okay, so after identity theft, you saw that imposter scams were right up there because they're related. Neighbor spoofing, people get so frustrated because their phone will ring and they'll see a number that's got the same prefix as their home prefix. And so they think, oh, this is somebody I know. And so they pick it up and it's just another robocall. Don't pick those up. I pretty much don't pick up anything that isn't recognized by my phone anymore. There are imposters calling about utilities, threatening to shut off people's power unless you give them your credit card number or your credit card information. We mentioned student loan debt relief, IRS and Social Security, huge number of complaints. Those seem to have died down. I think maybe that has cycled through, but we get a huge number of complaints from people saying that Social Security or the IRS has called them, claiming that they owe money to them and asking for their credit or checking information. ACA signups. There's a court juror scam that actually our courts here in Seattle had to issue a warning about, saying that folks would get a call saying, you're in trouble, you didn't show up for jury duty, you owe a fine, give me your credit card number. Relative in trouble is one that is a fairly old scam and this one preys on older folks, where they call and say, oh, your nephew is in trouble in Mexico. They were traveling and they don't want their parents to know, but can you help them out with money, because that will get them out of jail, and really please don't let their parents know. Well, that's a fishy story, right? But people fall for it. Microsoft support, another one, big tech scam, trying to extract money from you. Banks, Gilbert talked about how he had some experience working with banks, and one of the big things we hear about is banks being impersonated. Okay, so skimming and shimming, I think you're all familiar with these. These are pictures of some of the devices that are used to basically copy your credit card. I think these are bank machines and maybe gas stations. Shimmers are the evolution from skimmers. Skimmers copied your card with a magnetic stripe. Shimmers copy your chip. So, even those are not totally identity theft proof. So more tips for guarding against identity theft online. Update your security on your software or on your computers. Sign up for credit monitoring. Ask for your reports. There are 3 credit reporting agencies. We'll talk about those in a little bit, but there are 3 separate reporting agencies. You can get 1 report from each of them every year. And so what we ask people do, or what we recommend that people do, is get 1 from each of them every 4 months, so that you can get you can get 3 reports a year if you'd like, to make sure that nobody's using your credit information. Use strong passwords. Use 2-factor identification whenever you have the opportunity to do that. Don't open email. This seems like a gimme, but don't open email if you don't know where they're from. Don't respond to email that seems like it's coming from somebody who's a common vendor, because it could be a scam. Usually legitimate companies aren't going to send you email just randomly. So we ask people not to do that. And if you have a question, look up the real phone numbers. Usually your credit card will have a number on the back. You can find the legitimate phone numbers for these companies. We tell people, if you think you're being contacted by them, go independently, look up at their number. Don't respond to the email. Go independently, look at the number, and call them and ask if they've tried to contact you. Don't use public Wi-Fi. A lot of people sit around in the airports, probably doing financial transactions. We recommend you not do that, because there are ways for folks to capture your information over public Wi-Fi. We've talked about student loan. At the FTC, we have a link called onguardonline.gov, and that gives additional tips if you want to share with your clients about how they can protect themselves. And I think you probably all know, use secure networks only, and look for the little secure button. Phishing, I think we've all heard about phishing and how phishers try to extract information or money from you. This is one that we have I think we have it on our website, about how you can tell there's a phishing attempt. It's vague. Dear member, it doesn't identify you by name. It says you've got a trouble with your MasterCard. Well, first of all, authorizing is spelled wrong. If there are typos in an email like that, then that's usually a sign that it's fake, because a legitimate company is not going to send out an email with typos in it. They wouldn't know that you have a MasterCard. They're literally fishing for information and hoping you fall for it. And anytime anybody's asking you for credit card information through a random email, that's got to be suspicious, right? So, and then look at the return address. It's a Netflix address that looks weird. Yeah, so all of those kinds of things are indications of problems. Smishing is like phishing, but it comes over text. Wells Fargo, your card's been deactivated, call us. So the panic person calls and ends up giving their number. Same thing from another vendor. You want a gift card, call me to collect it. One of the things that we just heard about fairly recently, I don't know if you all heard about this, is there's been a Bank of America Zelle scam where people have been losing money because they're being told that, it looks legit because the text says, oh, did you make a transaction to this vendor through Zelle? And the consumer says, gosh, no, that's fake, that, somebody's stolen money out of my Zelle account. So then somebody who pretends to be from B of A calls you and says, oh, we'll get this straightened out for you. Well, in the process of doing that, they're getting your information and you end up getting ripped off. So that's just one of the latest scams we've heard about, but there are a lot of them. I think I heard about one today, or we posted about one today on our website about Amazon imposters getting money from people. So what are some of the warning signs for identity theft? Clearly, if you get a call from your bank, and I've gotten these calls from my bank saying, did you make this transaction? And you say no, and you just have a headache because now you've got to change all of your credit card numbers because somebody's got your credit card. So that's a drag. Bank account withdrawals from places you don't recognize. Again, this is why we need to do online banking so we can check that frequently. Big red flag if your credit's denied. Somebody might be getting credit in your name. If you're not receiving your mail, somebody might have misdirected your mail to them so that they can impersonate you. And just odd questions about vendors. So if, obviously you're not going to remember all of the information that's in this presentation, but we do actually have a dedicated website called identitytheft.gov. And that will give you all of the information that you need about identity theft and how to formulate a recovery plan, which I will show you here in just a minute. The recovery plan involves doing a lot of things. We contact the companies where the fraud occurred. We contact the credit reporting agencies. We place fraud alerts. We get copies of credit reports. We do an identity theft report to the FTC. We'll talk about all of this here, and I'll show you how to do it. So this is identitytheft.gov. And by the way, .gov is the extension that is used by government agencies. If you see something that says, for example, ftc.com or irs.com, then you know that's somebody trying to impersonate those agencies, because a legitimate government agency will have the .gov extension. So, that's one of the first clues to imposter scams. So if you go into identitytheft.gov, we will, after you've gone through some of the information, you can see how to get started with fixing your identity theft issue. And what we will do is we'll walk you through several steps. This splash page sort of tells you how we're going to walk through, and I'm just grabbing some of the steps, but this page will get you to all of the steps that you need. But we have you answer a series of questions, and then it's like a tree, depending on how you answer these questions, it will take you to the next page that's relevant. But for example, somebody filed for unemployment in my name. Somebody filed a tax return in my name. Someone has information, and I'm worried that I might have been a victim of identity theft. Data breach. Who hasn't been the victim of a data breach at some point? So you can click on any one of these, and then it will take you to the next step. We have identity theft reports, and the reason why identity theft reports are helpful is because they can be used with credit agencies to help you straighten out your situation. Again, we'll ask you questions to walk you through how did they use your information? Did they get credit cards with it? Did they open up accounts with it? Did they open up savings accounts with it? All of these different things will take you to a different step. And then we just say submit the report. And at the end of the day, that's because you can use that to help straighten out some of your accounts and to show that this really was a legitimate identity theft report and that you really are the victim of a crime. So your recovery plan, we say call Citibank. Well, Citibank, in this instance was the bank vendor. Place a fraud alert on your credit accounts. You review your credit reports. You file your report. And we'll talk about that in a second. But when you contact the companies where the identity thief committed the fraud, you usually have to contact the fraud department because customer service will probably refer you to the fraud department. It might be that you have to start at customer service, but eventually somebody's going to have to straighten out your account for you. Ask them to close your account, change your passwords and PINs. These are all kind of simple things. And they might want that identity theft report for their records. And this is just an example of a letter that you can use. And so we put it out there for people to copy. if they'd like to show the vendor that they've been a victim of identity theft. So we've just given you the template so you can do that. We say contact the credit reporting agencies and place fraud alerts or freezes. Quite frankly, I think what people should do is do a freeze as opposed to an alert. There are specific laws with respect to children. You can do a free credit freeze for children under 16. Now, though, you can do free credit freezes for everybody because there have been so many identity theft problems. Here are the credit bureau contacts at the 3 major credit bureaus. Again, those are places where you can download your credit report to. So this gives you the contact information. Ironically, Equifax was the Equifax suffered a data breach of its own a few years ago. So I don't know if you might have gotten notified by them that now you're covered by fraud protection because Equifax had your information. So that's ironic. Why do you care about that? Because the information that's on your credit report is everything a person needs to create credit in your name. And that's your social, it's your loan history, it's basically all of your financial information. So you really want to make sure that you've got that straight. I just talked a little bit here about your credit score. I don't know that you really need your credit score, but you might have to pay for it. That's not free. Fraud alerts. What's the difference between a freeze and a fraud alert? Alert now lasts a year. Credit freezes are free for everybody now. They used to be, you used to have to pay a certain amount of money to freeze and unfreeze your credit, but they're free now. And if you're active duty military, they've been free for a while. Fraud alerts, if you contact one credit reporting agency, they will contact the other 2. They're required to contact the other 2. And it means that they have to take extra steps to verify your identity before they, for example, establish a new credit card. That's good for a year at a time. If you've already been the victim of identity theft, then you can get an additional amount of time for your fraud alert, and that's where that identity theft report comes in handy. But you might want to just do a credit freeze. And a credit freeze means that nobody can open up credit in your name, including you, until you unfreeze it. And in that instance, you have to contact every CRA, credit reporting agency. They're not going to do it for you, but it is free. And if you do it within, this gives you the deadlines by which they have to freeze your credit. And if you really think you've been the victim of identity theft, then I suggest that you do a credit freeze, because then at least you can assure yourself that somebody's not out there opening up new credit cards in your name. So again, because you guys do financial counseling, we have materials that are available on identity theft. Quite frankly, it might be easier for you just to download them or tell your clients to download them from the internet, from our websites if you'd like. We do have some materials available in Spanish. Most of our materials at the FTC are available in Spanish now, and we also have several Asian languages as well. So if you go into our ftc.gov website, you can see, I think there's a link that says materials available in other languages, and you can find some additional information in other languages. Credit, I just wanted to add this on here because it is a financial wellness program, just to talk a little bit about the fact that we do have resources specifically pertaining to credit. And so we've captured the consumer.gov website as well, or URL as well. And so if you go into consumer.gov and you look for credit, then you can find specific information about credit, loans, debt. You've got an ID theft link because they're closely related. But we talk about all sorts of types of credit that might be helpful for you. So that's another source for you. Quite frankly, the FTC website has so much information. You just go into ftc.gov or consumer.gov and just hunt around the website if you'd like, because we have a ton of information. We've got a lot of really great videos. They're each, 1 to 2 minutes long. They're well produced. They're snappy. They cover a lot of different subjects. Again, because you do client counseling, You might want to take a look at some of those videos and see if any of them might be helpful to your clients or to your peers. Again, a lot of the videos are in Spanish as well as English, so they can be very helpful. The credit reports, this is just information again about how to get your free credit reports from your credit reporting agencies and to check for ID theft. Credit information, this is just more, I'm just trying to direct you to all the different kinds of information we have about financial well-being. So again, mortgages, health, jobs, identity, scams, it's all there. You could spend easily hours looking at all the information that we have on our website about financial wellness. So on that note, if you want to be really up to date on what's going on at the FTC and find out what the latest scams are, you can sign up for our consumer alerts. If you want to read them, you can see what the bad guys are up to these days. We have a Facebook page, so you can like us on Facebook. We have a Twitter feed. It's a lot of it is kind of policy wonky stuff, but we also push out our press releases on both our Facebook page and our Twitter feed. The more practical, the daily bread and butter kind of information that we have is at consumer.gov, consumer.ftc.gov, or just ftc.gov will get you to all of the consumer information that you might want to have. So that's it for my formal presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer any of them that you have. And if I can't answer them, I'll find somebody who can. Sure.
I recently saw this on social media, and you brought it up a little bit earlier about getting put on the do not call registry. But is it true that if you're on the registry for longer than like a month, that you can like actually file a lawsuit if someone calls you again? Is that a thing? I'm not entirely sure.
I'm not sure about private rights. I'd have to look that up. That's a good question. But if somebody is on, so if you're on the do not call registry and they have called you, the FTC certainly can. That is something that we will bring as one of our charges when we file actions. I just don't know how the private right of action works. I assume that that's the case for private people as well. And then there's also, bear in mind that some states have do not call statutes as well. I don't know if Oregon does or not.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions?
Hi, Tina. Yeah, I watched a little news clip about QR codes and how that's become the newest kind of, because the scammers are learning how to redirect people or put out fake ones.
Yeah.
So what do we need to be careful with, or what do we tell people to be careful with when, the QR codes are everywhere?
They are. And, it's just, I don't have a specific response on QR codes. Gilbert and I were saying earlier, it's hard to stay one step ahead of the bad guys because they're just always thinking of the next thing. Do you have a specific scenario that you're thinking of?
Nothing specific. I don't use them much, but I know they pop up everywhere. You go to a restaurant and it says, look at our menu here. The TV, if you're shopping, it pops up. And so I had never even thought about it, but then I saw the news, the little news blurb about it. So I hadn't thought about what actually is the process when I scan a QR code somewhere. What information are they getting from me when I scan that and click the link to whatever they're telling me to go to? Nothing really specific, just kind of thinking about it.
I'm going to, I'll get back to you through Taylor. I'm going to check with our tech people because we have a tech lab, and there might be somebody in our tech lab who can answer that specific question for you, and I'll see if I can get it for you and get back to you. I do remember a funny story. Maybe this was just rumor, but I think it's actually true, of somebody he was on TV and he said something about, he was like, I think he was a student. And I think he said, I need money, send money to my account. Here's my QR code. And then he showed it to like the camera, and then whoever saw it ripped him off because they were able to get his account information through his QR code because he showed it on camera. Because he was saying, send me money. And so some criminal just took the money out of his account. I mean, I would say, if you have a QR code that's associated with you, it's easy to create a QR code. You can create a QR code. I think there's a website that's like create a QR code kind of thing. It's easy to create a QR code. So you can create a QR code for anything. I would just say if you create one about yourself, protect it. But when you're shooting a picture of one, I'm not sure if anything goes back. I mean, I don't know if anything's captured that way because you're really taking a picture of it. But I will check with our tech people and see if anybody can give me some better information. Because we actually, and you might have read about this, we have a technology lab and we are trying to beef up our technical expertise simply because it is so hard to stay ahead of the criminals these days and figure out what they're doing next. Other questions? Okay, well, if you do have follow-up questions, Taylor knows how to reach me. Here's my email as well. Feel free to ask. Like I say, if I don't know the answer, I will try to get it for you because, we've got a big agency. And in fact, we have people who specialize in different things throughout the agency. So oftentimes, I'm more of a generalist, but we do have specialists who will. We have a whole financial practices division, for example, in Washington, D.C. So oftentimes if I can't get a question or find an answer to a question for you, I can find somebody who will find the answer for you. So, okay, well, if there's not anything else, I'll just say thank you so much. I again, I'm so impressed that U of O has a financial wellness center and all the work that you all are doing to help yourselves and to help your fellow students because the more you can educate people, the fewer problems we will see and the fewer complaints we'll have. And you'll keep that reputation Oregon has for not having as many complaints on identity theft as other parts of the country.